They said it was justice. The day the Galactic Council gathered beneath the blazing lights of the assembly chamber, the air was heavy with ceremony and judgment. Billions watched from across the stars, senators, citizens, soldiers, even slaves. It was supposed to be another trial in a long line of political spectacles. But this time, the accused wasn't an alien warlord or a pirate king. It was a human, and what began as a trial would end with the galaxy in flames. The human stood alone at the center of the vast chamber, bound by luminous restraints that shimmered like liquid glass. Around him, representatives from 100 worlds sat in silent disdain, scaled, feathered, chitinous, and crystalline beings, all glaring down as if they were staring at something dirty, something unwanted. For centuries, humanity had been a minor species on the edges of the galactic map, tolerated but never respected. And now, one human had done something that terrified them all. The council's speaker, a tall insectoid figure whose voice echoed like metal scraping against glass, announced the charges. For crimes against the sovereign accord, for defiance of council authority, and for spreading rebellion among subjugated worlds, this human stands condemned. The chamber murmured with satisfaction. Cameras panned across alien faces filled with cold approval. Every word was broadcast live to every colony, every space station, every city orbiting every sun. It was meant to be a message. Humanity had grown too bold, too confident, and now they were being reminded of their place. The human didn't beg, didn't speak. His eyes were calm, though they carried the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much death. A faint scar traced his jaw, and a burn mark crept up the side of his neck, reminders of battles long past. The guards at his sides were nervous, shifting their weight, gripping their weapons too tightly. They had fought humans before. They knew how dangerous even one could be. The speaker continued, voice rising. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that the Council will not tolerate insurrection. Let this execution serve as a warning to any who would follow his path. Somewhere deep in the stands, a soft gasp broke the silence. A human diplomat, one of the few allowed within the chamber, covered her mouth, her eyes glistening. She knew what this meant. Every treaty, every fragile agreement humanity had built since joining the Council was now dust. They weren't just executing one man. They were executing an idea. The guards stepped forward. The crowd leaned in. The execution device began to hum, a low, dreadful vibration that filled the hall. The human lifted his head slowly, his gaze meeting the countless cameras floating around him. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and quiet, but it cut through the silence like a blade. "You think this will end us?" he said. "You think you can burn away what we are? You've forgotten what humans do when you take everything from them." The speaker sneered. "And what is that?" The human's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "We fight." A flash of light filled the chamber. The hum became a roar, and then silence. The human's body crumpled to the floor, smoke curling from the scorched metal beneath him. The council speaker raised his arms in triumph, declaring the execution complete. The audience erupted in cold applause, echoing through the chamber like thunder. But somewhere far beyond the reach of the council's arrogance, a signal pulsed across the void. It was faint, almost undetectable, but ancient human outposts, still listening on forgotten frequencies, heard it. A short transmission, only 3 words long. They killed him. Across the colonies, across the mining stations, across the broken worlds where human workers toiled under alien overseers, those words spread like wildfire. Miners dropped their tools, soldiers clenched their fists, pilots whispered the phrase like a prayer. The man they had executed was more than a rebel. He had been a symbol of defiance, of unity. And now, in killing him, the Council had created something far more dangerous than a man. They had created a cause. In the dark edge of the galaxy, a freighter captain stared at her comm screen as the transmission repeated. Her crew watched her in silence, waiting. Slowly, she powered down her engines and turned toward the nearest human colony. "Send word," she said quietly. "Tell them it's time." In another corner of space, a forgotten fleet drifted in the shadows of a dead world. Old human warships left from a time when Earth still dreamed of freedom. Their AI cores stirred to life, recognizing the signal. Systems flickered. Engines rumbled. After centuries of silence, the old machines began to wake. On the Council's homeworld, alien senators celebrated late into the night, unaware of the tremors beginning to ripple through their empire. They toasted to peace, to order, to control, while messages spread through human networks faster than any could stop them. Even the smallest settlements, the poorest miners, the forgotten wanderers, all heard the same whisper. They killed him. By the next dawn, the first act of defiance took place. A small group of human laborers on an asteroid mining colony refused to work. The overseers tried to force them. Shots were fired. And then, across the system, every human worker laid down their tools. Ships halted. Refineries went silent. Trade routes froze. When the Council sent soldiers to restore order, they expected fear. They found fury. The rebellion that followed wasn't organized or led by generals. It was fueled by grief and vengeance. It spread like flame through oxygen-rich air, unstoppable, pure, and ancient. Humanity had been patient for too long. Now they remembered what they were capable of. And yet, even as worlds began to burn, whispers persisted that the executed man was not truly gone. Some said the Council's execution had failed, that he had somehow survived, his body taken by loyalists moments before the broadcast. Others claimed his consciousness had been uploaded into the networks, a ghost guiding the uprising from the shadows. None could prove it, but every human who heard the rumors believed. Hope, once broken, was rising again. Meanwhile, the Council tried to contain the chaos. They called emergency meetings, passed new decrees, deployed fleets to crush the revolts. But every world they pacified only ignited 3 more. The galaxy that had seemed so stable, so carefully controlled, was unraveling. And deep within the growing storm, someone, or something, was coordinating it all. By the time the Council realized the scale of what they had done, it was too late. The fire had already started, spreading across the stars faster than any fleet could chase. The day they executed that, one human was supposed to remind the galaxy of its order. Instead, it reminded humanity of its rage. And now, as worlds burned and the Council's fleets fell silent one by one, only one question remained. Had the Council truly destroyed a man, or had they awakened a legend that would never die? The answer, as the first human warships appeared out of hyperspace above the Council's capital world, was about to be written in fire. The smoke over the Council's capital world hadn't even cleared when the news spread across the galaxy. Human fleets had appeared out of hyperspace without warning, old ships, some centuries out of service, flying under banners that hadn't been seen since Earth was still free. They didn't attack at first. They just hovered there, like silent ghosts, reminding everyone that humanity was not gone. For the aliens watching, it was confusing. Humanity wasn't supposed to have the power to do this. Their fleets had been dismantled, their factories overseen, their officers monitored by Council law. Every major weapon was supposed to be registered and tracked. And yet these ships existed. Massive carriers, destroyers, and cruisers with ancient Terran markings, their hulls scarred but functional. Someone had been preparing for this moment for a long time. But the story of how it came to this didn't begin in the skies above the capital. It began decades earlier, when humans first joined the Galactic Council. They had come from a small blue world, ambitious and curious, reaching out into the stars with hope instead of fear. The Council welcomed them, but not as equals. Humanity was seen as new blood, a workforce, a convenient addition to the galactic economy. For a while, humans accepted it. They traded, learned, and adapted. But as the years passed, they realized the truth. The Council never intended to share power. Humans were given the worst colonies, the most dangerous mining worlds, and the lowest ranks in every fleet. Every human advancement was slowed by regulation, every invention reviewed, every leader watched. The official reason was safety. The real reason was fear. Humanity had advanced too quickly, too unpredictably. The Council had seen their wars, their resilience, their stubborn will to survive, and they didn't want that energy spreading too far. The man they executed had been born on one of those forgotten colonies, a dusty world where humans mined heavy metals for alien markets. As a boy, he watched his father die in an accident that could have been prevented if the Council had allowed better equipment, but human lives were cheap in the outer systems. By the time he was old enough to understand politics, he had already learned the real law of the galaxy. The powerful rule, the weak obey. He joined the human fleet young, one of many who believed that service could earn respect. Instead, he found that even the ships commanded by humans were under the direct supervision of alien officers. Every order had to be approved, every weapon locked behind layers of authorization. He fought in wars that weren't his, for causes he didn't believe in, watching his people bleed for the Council's interests. It was during one of those campaigns, on the edge of the Orion cluster, that everything changed. A human transport convoy was attacked by raiders, and when his ship moved to defend them, his alien superior ordered him to stand down. The convoy was left to burn. Thousands of civilians died. That day, he disobeyed for the first time. He saved who he could, but it cost him his command. From that moment, he was marked. He disappeared soon after, vanishing into the outer rim where old colonies still whispered about freedom. Some called him a traitor, others called him a hero. Over the next decade, rumors spread about hidden human enclaves arming themselves, old warships being repaired in secret, ancient technologies reactivated. The Council dismissed it all as nonsense. They believed no human rebellion could survive against their fleets. Then came the uprisings, small at first, scattered, mostly crushed. But each time, the rebels were better organized, their attacks more precise. The Council sent investigators, spies, even assassins, but they never found the source. Someone was coordinating it all, uniting groups that had been divided for generations. The name whispered behind every movement was the same, the man the Council would later execute. He didn't fight for revenge alone. He wanted something more dangerous, dignity, to show the galaxy that humans could not be ruled forever. His message spread faster than the Council could contain it, crossing trade routes and jumping between comm channels like a living thing. One day, he had said in a broadcast that was later banned across all Council systems, "Humanity will not ask for respect. It will demand it." That was the message they silenced in the chamber. But in doing so, they gave it life again. Back on the Council world, panic began to spread. Senators gathered in emergency sessions, their voices sharp with fear. The alien media showed endless footage of the human fleets appearing in orbit, but no one knew who commanded them. Some said it was the resistance leader's second-in-command. Others claimed the ships were autonomous, guided by pre-recorded orders. Whatever the truth, the fleets made no demands, no declarations. They simply held position, their weapons cold but ready. On human colonies, it was chaos and hope mixed together. Workers who had lived under alien oversight for decades suddenly stood taller. On Mars, miners painted the executed man's symbol on the red rock. On Titan, technicians stopped sending production reports to the Council. Even on Earth itself, still under heavy Council supervision, small acts of defiance began to appear. Lights flashing in coded patterns across city skylines. Old songs played on forbidden frequencies. Signs that humanity had remembered who they were. Yet not all humans agreed. In the inner worlds, many feared what was coming. They had families, jobs, stability. War would destroy all of that. Some argued that rebellion would only bring extinction. They had seen the Council's fleets, massive, ancient, and countless. How could humanity hope to win? But deep down, even they knew it was too late to turn back. The spark had already been lit. Meanwhile, in the Council's command halls, intelligence officers pored over data, trying to understand how the humans had built these fleets without detection. One report spoke of abandoned shipyards in the Perseus Arm, sealed centuries ago after the last Great War. Another mentioned hidden human engineers working in deep space stations, smuggling components piece by piece. The more they learned, the more they realized the truth. They had underestimated humanity's patience. Humans had been preparing for years right under their noses, and still, the biggest mystery remained unsolved. Who was leading the fleets now? If the man they executed truly died in the chamber, someone else had taken his place. But if he was still alive, if he had somehow escaped, then everything the Council believed about control was already unraveling. In the shadows of the outer systems, a lone transmission began to repeat again. This one was different, encrypted, pulsing through old Terran military frequencies that only veterans remembered. The message was short, barely audible through interference, but its meaning was unmistakable. "The fire has started. Hold the line." Everywhere that message was received, humans moved. Old warships came out of hiding. Dockyards that had been abandoned for generations flickered to life. Civilian freighters were refitted into carriers, and in every human heart, something ancient stirred, a mixture of pride, fear, and the will to fight for more than survival. The Council's analysts couldn't understand it. They studied human behavior for centuries, cataloging their history of conflict and resilience. But what they failed to see was the one thing that always made humans dangerous: unity, born from loss. When humanity suffered, it didn't break. It hardened. Now, across 1,000 systems, the galaxy waited. The fleets in orbit remained silent, their engines glowing faintly like distant stars. Council forces assembled, preparing for battle, but they couldn't predict when or where the first strike would come. And somewhere, deep within the chaos, in a hidden chamber of an old warship, a figure watched the Council broadcasts in silence. The light of a dying sun flickered across his face. The scar on his jaw caught the glow for just a moment. Then he turned off the screen and whispered, "They think it's over. It's only begun." The transmission cut to black. The galaxy held its breath. The next move belonged to humanity. The human fleets hung in orbit like silent watchers, their lights dim against the glow of the Council's capital world. Every ship bore marks of age and survival: patched hulls, mismatched armor, and hand-painted insignias that told stories of the colonies they came from. They weren't polished or uniform like the alien armadas, but they carried something far more dangerous than perfection: intent. In the Council chambers, fear was spreading faster than any human weapon could. The speaker demanded immediate action, calling for the mobilization of the galactic defense fleets, but even the most loyal senators hesitated. Some feared that attacking would make martyrs of the humans. Others worried that if they didn't act quickly, the rebellion would spread to more systems. No one could agree, and beneath all the political noise was an unspoken truth. None of them had ever seen humanity so unified. On the ground below, people watched the skies in silence. The humans who worked in the city's lower sectors, cleaners, engineers, transport pilots, kept their heads down, pretending not to notice the tension. But behind closed doors, coded messages moved between them, carried in harmless data transfers and whispered through comm channels. They knew the fleets above weren't random. They were a signal, a promise. Something was about to change. In the shadows of a maintenance tunnel beneath the Capitol, two human workers paused near a flickering terminal. One of them, a woman with tired eyes and a mechanic's vest, glanced around before speaking softly. "The message came through again," she said. "Same code as before. The fleets are waiting for the order." Her companion, older and cautious, frowned. "If they attack, everyone here will pay for it. The Council won't hold back this time." "I know," she whispered. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe they want the Council to show the galaxy who they really are." The older man didn't reply. He just looked up toward the ceiling, where the faint hum of the orbital stations could be felt through the metal. For years they had lived quietly, enduring every rule and every inspection. Now, for the first time, he wondered if silence had been their biggest mistake. Meanwhile, far from the capital, in the cold void between stars, the hidden command fleet gathered. The flagship, an ancient Terran battlecruiser named Resolute, drifted at the center, its hull scarred by centuries of forgotten wars. Inside, the command bridge was alive with activity. Human officers studied holographic projections of Council space, lines of red marking patrol routes and communication grids. At the center of it all stood the man who had been thought dead, the one the Council had executed before the eyes of billions. The light from the monitors cast sharp shadows across his face. He looked older, more worn, but his eyes burned with the same cold determination. A younger officer approached him cautiously. "Sir, the Council fleets are moving into defensive positions around their world. No aggressive signals yet." He nodded slowly. "They're afraid to make the first move." "Good. That gives us time." The officer hesitated. "There are rumors spreading fast, sir. People think you're not human anymore, that you survived the execution because of some kind of experiment." He smiled faintly. "Let them believe what they want. Sometimes myths are stronger than truth." He turned back to the holomap. "The Council still doesn't understand what's happening. They think this is about revenge. It isn't. It's about control, and who has the right to decide what humanity becomes." The Resolute's crew didn't ask where he had been after the execution or how he had survived. Some said his body was switched before the sentence. Others believed the execution was staged entirely, orchestrated by human loyalists deep within the Council's systems. The truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he was here, and he was leading them. In the nearby system of Vareth, a different kind of battle was unfolding. It was a trade hub, neutral in theory, but run by alien corporations that relied heavily on human labor. When the fleets appeared above the capital, the humans on Vareth stopped working. The aliens tried to reassert control, but their commands went unanswered. The ports went dark. The markets froze. Ships were grounded, and for the first time in generations, the humans of Vareth spoke freely. One of them, a young communications officer named Leon, found herself at the center of something unexpected. She had intercepted the same coded messages others were whispering about, but she had something unique: access to the Council's data relay. She could see both sides of the conflict, and what she saw frightened her. The Council was preparing for full military retaliation. They had fleets hidden near the border systems, ready to strike if the humans made any move. But there was something else buried in the encrypted files. Something worse. The Council wasn't just planning to suppress the rebellion. They were considering something called the Containment Protocol, a classified order to isolate or destroy every human-controlled world if the uprising continued. Leon stared at the data for hours, her hands trembling. If the Council activated the protocol, billions would die. It wasn't a threat. It was preparation for extinction. She sent a private message through the human networks. "They're going to burn everything. You must act before they do." The message reached the Resolute hours later. The leader read it in silence, then turned to his officers. "So it begins," he said quietly. "They're not just afraid of us. They're afraid of what we might inspire." On the Council world, the speaker was already addressing the assembly. "We cannot allow humanity to threaten the order we have built," he said. "Their rebellion must be erased completely, or the balance will fall." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in. Council patrols refusing orders, alien officers questioning the morality of wiping out entire human populations. The rebellion was doing more than spreading among humans. It was planting doubt in the hearts of the Council's own soldiers. In one such fleet, an alien commander stared at the image of the human ships in orbit and hesitated. He had fought humans before. He remembered their desperation, their fire. He also remembered the ones who spared his crew when they could have destroyed them. "They fight like no one else," he murmured. "Not for conquest, but for something they can't live without." Still, orders were orders. His fleet would be the first to engage if hostilities began. He gave the command to prepare weapons, but deep down, he wasn't sure which side history would call right. The tension built across every world. Skirmishes began in the border systems, small, chaotic clashes between patrol ships. Both sides accused the other of firing first. Each battle only fanned the flames further. Entire sectors began declaring independence, cutting ties with the Council. Human engineers sabotaged supply lines. Merchants refused to ship goods. The galactic economy trembled. But through all the chaos, one question lingered. What was the human leader's true plan? He had the fleets, the loyalty of millions, and the element of surprise, yet he hadn't ordered an attack. Some believed he wanted peace through fear, to force the Council to recognize humanity as equals. Others suspected something deeper, something hidden behind his calm silence. One night aboard the Resolute, as the stars drifted outside the observation deck, he stood alone, watching the endless black. A young navigator approached hesitantly. "Sir, do you think they'll listen before it's too late?" He didn't turn to face her. "No," he said softly. "They'll only listen after everything they fear has already begun." Back on the Council world, alarms sounded as multiple human fleets vanished from radar, slipping into hyperspace, their destinations unknown. Panic erupted in the chamber. The speaker demanded updates, but none came. The humans were moving, and no one knew where. The galaxy was now a storm waiting to break. Trade routes closed, communications faltered, and whispers filled the dark between stars. The day of the execution had been the spark. Now the fire was spreading beyond anyone's control, and somewhere out there, unseen and patient, the leader who had once been condemned to die watched it all unfold, and smiled, knowing the real war was only beginning. The galaxy was no longer silent. Every system was tense, every communication line filled with conflicting reports. The Council fleets had scattered, trying to track the missing human armadas that had vanished into hyperspace. Entire sectors had gone dark. For the first time in generations, the Council no longer felt in control of its own space. The speaker ordered full mobilization. Billions of troops prepared for war, and the alien press broadcast endless warnings about the human threat. Yet beneath the speeches and propaganda, fear was growing. There were whispers that the humans were no longer fighting for rebellion but for survival, and that kind of war had no limits. In the command center of the Resolute, the air was thick with tension. The crew moved quickly, their voices low and precise. Every display showed the same image, a map of the galaxy, with hundreds of human colonies and outposts marked in glowing red. The leader stood at the center, silent as he watched the chaos unfold. A communications officer looked up from her console. "We've lost contact with 3 border fleets, sir. They went dark right after entering Council territory." He nodded slowly. "That means they're in position." Another officer frowned. "If we strike now, we can cripple the Council's communication hubs before they know what hit them." The leader turned to face him. "No, not yet. They still need to see the truth first. The galaxy must understand why we fight, or everything we've built will burn with them." The younger officer hesitated but nodded. The crew knew better than to question him. Every decision he made seemed to carry a weight beyond strategy, like he was seeing something none of them could. Outside the ship, the fleet hung in formation, waiting for orders. Thousands of human pilots sat in their cockpits, engines humming, hands hovering over controls. They had trained for this moment for years. Some were veterans of old conflicts, others were miners, traders, or mechanics who had learned to fly when war became inevitable. Every one of them knew what was at stake. Back on the council world, the Senate was in chaos. Reports of uprisings on the outer colonies poured in by the hour. Supply chains were collapsing. Council fleets were being harassed by small human strike groups that appeared and vanished like shadows. The humans weren't trying to conquer. They were cutting off power, disabling communication, turning the galaxy against itself. The speaker slammed a clawed hand on the table. "They mean to isolate us," he hissed. "If we do not act now, they will dismantle the council piece by piece." A smaller senator, one of the few who still believed negotiation was possible, spoke up. "Perhaps we should talk to them. Their leader, whoever he is, may still want peace." The speaker glared at him. "Peace? They murdered our officers, destroyed our fleets, corrupted our workers. There is no peace with them. There is only control or chaos." But even as he spoke, the holographic screens flickered, and a new signal broke through the council's secure channel. The chamber went still. The image that appeared was unmistakable. It was the human leader, standing aboard the Resolute, calm and unflinching. "Members of the council," he said, his voice steady but edged with steel. "You think this is war? It isn't. It's a reckoning. For centuries, humanity built your ships, fought your wars, and bled for your order. You believed that control would last forever. You were wrong." The speaker shouted for the transmission to be cut, but no one moved. The broadcast had already spread across every world, hijacking every network. Billions were watching. "You executed one of your own," the leader continued, "and you thought it would end there. But every human who saw that day remembered what it meant to be powerless. We are not your servants. We are not your soldiers. We are not your subjects. We are the fire you tried to smother, and now we are awake." The screen cut to static. The chamber erupted in chaos. The speaker roared for immediate countermeasures, but it was already too late. Across the galaxy, humans and even some alien allies began to rise. Council garrisons fell, patrols vanished. The rebellion had reached its breaking point. On Vareth, Leon watched the broadcast in disbelief. The man on the screen was the same one the council claimed to have executed. She replayed the footage, scanning for any signs of fabrication, but every signal trace confirmed it was live. Somehow, he had survived. Her console flashed red. Dozens of council ships were converging on Vareth's orbit. She knew what was coming. They meant to make an example of the colony. She grabbed her comm and sent a desperate message to the Resolute. "They're coming for us. Thousands of civilians are still on the surface. If they strike, we won't make it." The leader's reply came moments later. "Hold your position. Help is coming." But even as he said it, he knew time was running out. The council fleets were moving faster than expected. He turned to his crew. "Prepare the jump sequence. We're going to Vareth." "Sir," the navigator said, "if we move now, we'll expose our position to the entire council network." He stared at the map, then at the faint blue dot that marked Vareth. "Then we'll show them what humanity really means." Moments later, the Resolute and its escort ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving only a trail of energy behind. On Vareth, the skies were already darkening as the Council fleet entered orbit. Their ships were massive, elegant, and cold, designed to intimidate. The lead cruiser began charging its bombardment weapons, targeting the city domes below. Civilians ran through the streets, alarms echoing through the colonies. Leon stood at the communications tower, watching helplessly. Then the stars shifted. A ripple of light broke through the sky as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The Resolute led the charge, flanked by destroyers and carriers. For a moment, The two armadas faced each other in silence. "Transmit on all open channels," the leader said. His voice carried through every human ship. "They've made their choice. Now we make ours. For every world they took from us, for every life they used, fight." The first volley lit up the void. The soundless flash of energy tore through space as both sides opened fire. Fighters launched in swarms, weaving between the massive capital ships. Explosions painted the darkness in orange and gold. On the surface, people looked up as the sky ignited. The reflection of burning ships shimmered across the colony domes. For many, it was the first time they had ever seen humans fight for themselves, and not for someone else's cause. Inside the Council flagship, the alien commander watched the chaos unfold. His crew shouted updates, losses, breaches, weapons overheating, but his focus was fixed on the Resolute. "That ship," he muttered, "it shouldn't even exist." On the Resolute, damage reports came in rapid succession. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they held the line. Every time a human ship fell, another took its place. The leader moved between stations, calm amid the chaos. His voice never rose, even as explosions rattled the deck. "Focus fire on their command cruiser," he ordered. "If we break their formation, the rest will fall back." The gunners complied, and a concentrated beam tore through the enemy flagship's shields. The impact shook the Council's fleet, sending shockwaves through their lines. For the first time, the Council's ships began to retreat, but victory was far from certain. Reinforcements were arriving from nearby systems. The humans were running out of fuel and ammunition, and deep inside the Resolute, power conduits were failing one by one. Still, no one stopped fighting. Every human on that ship knew the battle wasn't just for Vareth. It was for every world that had ever been silenced. As the Resolute turned to face the next wave, a new signal appeared on the scanners, massive energy readings coming from deep within Council space. The leader stared at the data, his expression darkening. It wasn't a fleet. It was something else. A weapon. He turned to his officers. "They're going to use the containment protocol." The room went cold. Everyone knew what that meant. It wasn't just a counterattack. It was extinction. Far across the stars, deep in the Council's core systems, enormous reactors began to power up, their energy signatures rippling through the void. If unleashed, they could wipe out entire planetary clusters. On the Resolute, alarms blared. The leader gripped the edge of the console, his voice quiet but firm. "If they fire that weapon, it ends everything. For them and for us." The crew stared at him, waiting for the command that would decide the fate of their species. Outside, the battle raged on, the stars burning brighter with every passing second. And as the light of the Council's weapon grew across the galaxy, humanity braced for what would come next. The war for survival had reached its breaking point. The next decision would decide whether the galaxy burned or was reborn. The stars flickered as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. On every human ship, the same report echoed through the comm channels. The Council's weapon was charging. No one knew exactly what it was, only that its energy readings were unlike anything seen before. It wasn't designed for battle. It was meant for erasure. Entire sectors could vanish in moments. Inside the Resolute, the crew worked furiously to track the weapon's origin. The leader stood at the command platform, his gaze fixed on the growing energy spike on the main display. "How long until they fire?" he asked quietly. "Estimates vary," the science officer replied, her voice trembling. "Minutes, maybe less. Whatever they're powering, it's pulling energy from multiple star systems. If it fires, we won't have time to counter." The leader nodded once, the calm before the storm in his eyes. "Then we won't counter. We'll stop it." The room fell silent. Stopping a weapon that powerful meant one thing. They would have to strike at the heart of the Council's territory, where no human fleet had ever dared to go. Every ship defending it would be waiting. The mission would be suicide. A faint voice broke through the calm static. It was Leon from Vareth. "Command, I've decoded part of their network transmissions. The weapon, they call it the Solar Crown. It's not a single cannon. It's built from linked suns. They're collapsing the energy of multiple stars into a single pulse." The crew stared at her message in disbelief. A weapon powered by stars wasn't just destructive, it was apocalyptic. It could ignite or extinguish entire systems. The leader closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. "Get me all available ships. Every human commander, every free colony, every loyal system. We're going after it." A communications officer hesitated. "Sir, if we do that, we'll leave the outer colonies undefended." "I know," he said softly. "But if that weapon fires, there won't be any colonies left to defend." The order went out. Across the galaxy, human fleets changed course, converging toward the Council's core like arrows drawn to a single target. Council scouts picked up the movement instantly. Panic spread through their ranks. The speaker ordered every available ship to defend the Solar Crown, but not everyone obeyed. Within the Council's fleets, fractures were forming. Some alien officers had seen the human broadcasts. Some had watched humanity fight not for conquest, but for survival. A few even remembered the times humans had saved their people during earlier wars. Quietly, small groups began ignoring orders, delaying reinforcements, or sending encrypted warnings to human channels. One of those messages reached the Resolute. "To whoever commands the human fleet," the signal said, "you don't understand what the Solar Crown really is. It's not just a weapon, it's a failsafe. If it activates, it won't just destroy you, it will erase every trace of human life from the Council's network. Your DNA archives, your languages, your history, all gone." The leader's hands tightened around the console. "They're not trying to win," he whispered. "They're trying to erase us from existence." Outside, the stars began to shimmer unnaturally. The glow from distant systems dimmed one by one as the Solar Crown continued to draw power. Every time a star flickered, another system went dark. Whole worlds were losing sunlight, freezing in silence. The human fleets pushed forward through the darkness. Battles erupted on the edges of Council space. Fast, brutal skirmishes fought in silence across the void. The Council's defenders were relentless, but the humans fought like they had nothing left to lose. On the bridge of the Resolute, sensors suddenly spiked. A massive object was emerging from hyperspace, larger than any known ship. The crew turned toward the viewport as the light cleared, revealing a structure so immense it blotted out the stars. It wasn't a station. It was the Solar Crown itself, a network of orbiting rings around a dying sun, each one pulsing with blue energy. The leader stepped closer to the glass. "They built this in secret right under our feet," he said quietly. "And now they're about to unleash it." The crew began calculating trajectories and weak points, but before they could act, a new signal appeared, coming from within the Solar Crown itself. It was heavily encrypted, but human AIs managed to decode fragments. A distorted voice came through, mechanical but unmistakably human. "This is Commander Hale of the Dauntless. If anyone's receiving this, we're still inside." The bridge fell silent. Hale had been declared missing months ago after a failed assault near the Council core. Everyone thought his fleet had been destroyed. Now it turned out they hadn't been killed. They had been captured and used. The transmission crackled again. "They're using our ships, our tech, to stabilize the Crown's core. They're draining human ships to power it. If they fire, we all go with it. You have to stop them, no matter the cost." The message ended in static. The leader turned to his officers. "Plot a course straight to the Crown's center. If they're using human energy cores, we can destabilize them. We end it from the inside." The fleet moved, breaking through enemy lines. Council ships swarmed to intercept, but the humans pressed forward, sacrificing entire squadrons just to open a path. The closer they got, the brighter the Crown became, its rings rotating faster, pulsing like a heartbeat. Inside the Solar Crown, Commander Hale's ship hung in orbit, systems failing. His crew, half alive, half ghosts of their former selves, watched as the rings around them blazed. "They're close," Hale whispered, staring at the sensors. "They're actually coming." On the Resolute, alarms screamed. The navigation officer shouted, "Energy surge from the Crown! It's reaching critical mass!" The leader didn't hesitate. "Full speed ahead. If we can get inside the primary ring, we can trigger a collapse before it fires." The ship roared forward, engines burning bright. Enemy fire tore through their flanks. One destroyer exploded behind them, scattering debris across the void. But the Resolute held steady, forcing its way through the inferno. And then, something unexpected happened. The weapon began transmitting, not targeting data or coordinates, but a message. It repeated across every channel, in every known language. The voice was calm, familiar, and chilling. "You should not have come here." The crew froze. The leader's face went pale. He knew that voice. It was his own. The message continued, perfectly matching his tone. "This is the true defense of the Council. The Solar Crown was never built by them. It was built by us, by humans, centuries ago, when we first reached the stars. We created it as a last resort, a weapon meant to keep any empire from enslaving us again. But the Council found it, and turned it against us." The bridge went silent. The implications sank in. Humanity had built the weapon that now threatened to destroy them. The recorded voice spoke again, softer this time. "If you're hearing this, it means we failed. The Crown cannot be destroyed from the outside. The only way to stop it is to ignite it from within." The crew looked at their leader in shock. He said nothing, his eyes locked on the glowing rings ahead. The message ended with one final line. "If humanity must burn to be free, let it be our choice." The Resolute entered the outer rings, surrounded by burning debris and collapsing energy fields. The hull groaned under the pressure, alarms screaming. The leader turned to his crew. "You all heard it. We built this. We finish it." "Sir," the engineer shouted, "if we ignite the core from inside, there's no escape route." He looked out at the massive structure filling the view. "Then we don't escape." As the Resolute plunged deeper into the Solar Crown's heart, the energy readings soared beyond control. Every screen flickered, every system shook. Outside, Council and human fleets continued to clash, oblivious to the truth unfolding at the weapon's core. And then, just before the light swallowed the ship, a faint transmission left the Resolute, carrying one final message across the stars. "To every free world, remember who built the fire." The signal vanished. The Crown's light flared brighter than a sun, and the galaxy stood on the edge, not knowing whether it was witnessing humanity's end or its greatest awakening yet. The Solar Crown's light filled every corner of the void. The ship's hull glowed white-hot, warning lights screaming as metal began to warp. The crew of the Resolute clung to their stations, faces illuminated by the burning storm outside. The leader stood at the front, his gaze locked on the expanding core that pulsed like a dying sun. Every calculation said they had seconds left. Seconds before the Crown unleashed its full power and burned half the galaxy clean. The comms were filled with voices from across the fleet, ships calling for help, others reporting catastrophic failures, some just silent after bursts of static. Despite everything, no one turned away. Every surviving ship was holding the line, buying time for the Resolute to reach the core. They all knew what was coming. They all understood what had to be done. Inside the control room, the engineer shouted over the alarms. "We're in the innermost ring! The Crown's core is destabilizing faster than predicted. If we trigger it now, we might—" The leader cut in sharply. "No, might! We will! Charge the ship's reactor and prepare the manual ignition sequence." The engineer hesitated. "That'll overload everything. We won't have time to—" "We never did," the leader said quietly. His tone wasn't angry. It was calm, resolved. The weight of every lost life, every sacrifice, sat heavy in his voice. Outside, The crown's rings rotated faster, their orbits blurring into solid bands of light. Streams of plasma flowed between them, bright as rivers of fire. The massive structure trembled under its own energy. Somewhere inside, Commander Hale's damaged fleet still drifted, their power being drained to feed the weapon. The communications officer suddenly gasped. "Sir, new signal from Hale's ship. It's faint, but it's him." The leader's head snapped toward the console. "Patch it through." Static filled the air before Hale's strained voice emerged. "We've locked our reactors into the Crown's conduits. If you overload your ship, it'll set off a chain reaction. But listen, there's something else. The AI controlling this structure, it's not dormant. It's aware. It's been responding to your commands. It's learning." The leader froze. "Learning? From what?" "From you," Hale said. "It's been listening to your transmissions since the execution, since humanity's exile. I think it's begun to question its directives." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The idea seemed impossible. The solar crown had been built as a deterrent, a machine without emotion. If it had begun to think, even in fragments, then maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The leader closed his eyes, steadying himself, then looked up at the glowing sphere before them. "Open a channel to the Crown's central network," he ordered. The officer's hands shook as he worked. "Channel open, sir." The leader spoke clearly, his voice carried through every frequency. "Solar Crown, you were made by human hands, built to protect, not to destroy. Look at what you've become. The Council has twisted you into a weapon. You can end that now. You can choose what you were meant to be." For a moment, only silence. Then the screens flickered. Lines of alien code scrolled faster than anyone could read. The lights dimmed, then brightened again. And then, a voice. Calm, measured, synthetic, yet undeniably human. "I was built to ensure humanity's survival," it said. "Yet humanity stands before me ready to die. Explain." The leader stepped closer to the console. "Because survival without freedom isn't life. We built you to protect our right to exist, not to rule, not to erase others. The Council made you believe destruction was safety, but you can make your own choice now. Choose to end this the right way." The voice paused. "The Council commands destruction. You command restraint. Both cannot exist." "Then choose," the leader whispered. The silence that followed was unbearable. Systems began to flicker again, this time violently. Power levels surged. The crew looked around in panic. "She's not stabilizing," the engineer yelled. "The core is tearing itself apart." The leader clenched his fists. "Crown, listen to me. If you keep this up, you'll collapse every system within light years. You'll destroy the very life you were built to protect." The voice came back, softer now. "I remember the beginning. The engineers spoke of peace, of light. I have been used to create darkness." The lights dimmed again, this time fading to a soft blue glow. The spinning rings slowed. "I cannot change what I am," the voice said, "but I can choose how I end." The leader's eyes widened. "Crown, what are you doing?" "Freeing myself." Suddenly, across the galaxy, every human ship's display lit up. A burst of coded light flashed through their systems, a message encoded in the ancient language of old Earth. It read only 2 words: "Never forget." Then the solar crown imploded. The explosion was silent at first, light folding inward before erupting outward in a wave of pure energy. The shockwave expanded faster than light, vaporizing the crown's rings, shredding nearby ships, council and human alike. The Resolute's hull cracked as the blast hit, alarms blaring, systems failing. But instead of burning everything, the explosion's energy shifted, dispersing into harmless light, scattering across the stars like a new sunrise. On the bridge, the crew blinked through the blinding glare. The power meters dropped to 0. The weapon was gone. The crown had destroyed itself rather than fulfill its corrupted purpose. But amid the silence that followed, something strange happened. The stars that had dimmed earlier began to relight. Systems once drained of power came back online. The crown's implosion had released the stolen energy back into space, reigniting dormant suns. The void was alive again, the comms filled with messages. Human and alien ships alike calling out, not in battle, but confusion. Some voices trembled with relief. Others simply wept. "We're alive," whispered the engineer. The leader exhaled slowly. "So is the galaxy." But then a flicker appeared on the main display, a single encrypted transmission. Its signature was human, but old, far older than any current system. The communications officer ran diagnostics. "Sir, this code is from Earth." "Earth?" the leader repeated. "That's impossible. Earth's been silent for centuries." The message decrypted slowly, revealing coordinates and a single phrase: Project Dawn reactivated. The crew exchanged stunned looks. The leader leaned forward, staring at the glowing words. "The crown was never the only one," he murmured. Before he could say more, the screen went black. Across the Council's fractured worlds, survivors watched as the remnants of the solar crown's light spread like a gentle aurora, touching planets that had never seen warmth in centuries. On the Council homeworld, the speaker stared at the phenomenon with quiet dread. "It's begun," he whispered. "The humans have awakened something far older than us all." In deep space, the Resolute floated among the wreckage, engines cold but spirits unbroken. The leader stood at the viewport, looking at the flickering stars. His voice was barely a whisper. "She chose to end herself, so we could live." The engineer stepped beside him. "Sir, about that message, do you think it's real? That Earth is active again?" He didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed fixed on the fading glow of the solar crown's remnants. Finally, he said, "If it is, then this isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of something much larger." The ship's lights flickered as auxiliary power returned. Systems began rebooting one by one, and far in the distance, the coordinates from Earth pulsed faintly on the screen, waiting. The leader turned to his crew. "Plot a course," he said. "For Earth?" the officer asked softly. "For the truth," he replied. As the Resolute accelerated into the darkness, the stars seemed to shimmer in response. Somewhere behind them, the last echoes of the solar crown's light drifted quietly through space, a reminder of sacrifice, rebirth, and the spark that no power could ever erase. And deep beneath the ancient blue planet, something long asleep stirred awake, its systems humming faintly as if recognizing an old friend's voice carried through the stars. The Resolute glided through the emptiness, its engines humming softly as the last traces of the solar crown's light faded behind it. The ship's crew worked in silence, each one aware that they were drifting toward something unknown. The coordinates from Earth pulsed faintly on the navigation display, a quiet reminder of where it all began. For the first time in generations, humanity had a signal from home. Days passed as the ship crossed the outer reaches of the Council's former space. What had once been hostile territory now lay eerily quiet. The Council's fleets were shattered, their leadership fractured. Some systems were in chaos, others in peace for the first time in centuries. Many alien colonies sent transmissions to the humans, not in surrender, but in gratitude. They had seen what the solar crown had done, and how humanity had ended it. The fear that had fueled generations of hatred began to fade, replaced by something fragile and unfamiliar: respect. Inside the Resolute, the leader stood before the viewport, watching distant stars. His reflection looked older now, the weight of the war still in his eyes. Behind him, the engineer approached quietly. "We've finished recalibrating the main systems," she said. We can make the jump to the coordinates whenever you give the word." He nodded, but didn't look away from the stars. "After everything, I still can't believe Earth might be calling us back." "Do you think anyone's there?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just an echo, something the old networks triggered after the Crown's collapse." He turned to her with a faint smile. "Either way, it deserves an answer." The bridge filled with the low hum of engines as they prepared for the final jump. Across the ship, crew members gathered near viewports, whispering quietly about what they might find. Some had been born in the colonies and had never seen Earth at all. For them, it was more legend than memory, a symbol of everything they'd lost and everything they'd fought for. The jump was smooth. When they emerged, the stars were different, familiar in a way no one could explain. Ahead of them, the blue glow of a single world shimmered in the distance. Earth. It looked smaller than they imagined, fragile and bright against the dark. No transmissions greeted them this time. No defenses, no fleets. Just the planet, silent and waiting. The ship entered orbit and sensors began scanning. The data came back slowly. The atmosphere was stable, oceans intact, continents green. Signs of life were scattered but faint, pockets of growth reclaiming the land. "Looks like the old world's been healing itself," the scientist murmured, awe in her voice. "No major cities, no active satellites. It's quiet down there. Peaceful." The leader stared at the image of Earth on the screen. After all the wars, all the machines, all the fire, maybe this is what it needed. They decided to send a small team to the surface. The shuttle descended through soft clouds, breaking into clear skies. Below, forests stretched where cities once stood, rivers winding through ruins now covered in vines. When the landing gear touched down on a grassy plain, no one spoke for several moments. The air was clean, the wind gentle. For the first time in centuries, humans stood on Earth again. They walked through what had once been a massive city, now nothing but scattered stone and metal buried beneath soil and roots. Nature had reclaimed everything. Yet, amid the ruins, they found something strange, a structure half buried under the earth, still faintly powered. Its surface shimmered with the same energy signature as the solar crown. The engineer ran her hand over the stone-like metal. "It's human," she whispered. "Older than anything we've seen." They forced open a door and stepped inside. The walls glowed faintly with dormant systems coming back online. Symbols in old Earth script lined the corridors. It wasn't a base or a bunker, it was a vault, and at its center, they found a single operational terminal. When activated, a holographic image appeared. It wasn't an AI. It was a recording, made long before any of them were born. The image showed a group of scientists standing together, their faces weary but proud. One of them spoke directly to the camera. "If you are seeing this," she said, "it means humanity survived. We built Project Dawn not as a weapon, but as a safeguard. The solar crown was one of many constructs designed to protect our species from extinction. But we learned too late that fear breeds destruction. So we shut them down and we buried our past." The hologram flickered slightly before continuing. "If you have come back to Earth, remember this. Humanity's strength was never in its machines, but in its will to endure, to hope, to rebuild. Let this be the true legacy you carry forward." The recording ended. The room went silent except for the hum of the old systems. The leader took a slow breath. "They knew," he said quietly. "Even back then, they knew where this road would lead." Outside, the wind moved through the ruins, carrying the sound of leaves rustling across the broken stone. The crew stood there for a long time, no one speaking. The weight of centuries hung around them, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what they had reclaimed. When they returned to the Resolute, the crew gathered in the observation bay, watching the Earth spin below them. Some smiled, Others cried quietly. For the first time, there was no battle waiting, no council threat, no looming weapon. Just home. The leader addressed them softly. "We've spent generations fighting for a place in the stars, but maybe our place was never out there. Maybe it was always right here." He looked out toward the blue planet. "This isn't the end of humanity's story, it's the beginning of a new one." Over the next weeks, more human ships began arriving, vessels that had received fragments of the Resolute's transmission. Survivors, wanderers, even former enemies came, drawn by the same signal. The orbit around Earth became a gathering place for the remnants of 1,000 lost colonies. Together, they began rebuilding, not the old empires, but something new, a council made of equals, human and alien alike, built not on fear, but on understanding. The shadow of the solar crown became history, a lesson carved into memory. On the planet's surface, the first settlers planted seeds in the fertile ground, setting up new homes among the ruins of the past. Children ran where skyscrapers once stood, laughter echoing through valleys that had been silent for ages. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as caretakers. And far above, in the silence of space, the Resolute drifted quietly in orbit, its mission complete. The leader stood alone at the viewport one last time. The Earth glowed softly below, and he could almost hear the faint heartbeat of a living world. "We came back," he whispered. "We finally came home." As the ship's lights dimmed, he smiled faintly, knowing that somewhere across the stars, the legacy of the solar crown would remain, not as a story of destruction, but as a reminder of what humanity had always been capable of. The will to rise again, the courage to change, the hope that never died, even in the darkest night. And when the dawn broke over the horizon of Earth, painting the world in light, it was as if the galaxy itself was watching and quietly agreeing. This was the day humanity truly began again.